We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Free Association Radio. This is Robert Phoenix. I'm your host today on 11th House Radio, one of two shows I do weekly here on the Blog Talk Radio Network. The other show, of course, is Far Fridays, or the Friday Farcast, wherever you want to check in on that one. And that is 2 hours worth of scintillating interviews with some of today's most important thinkers and minds. They're authors, they're activists, they're musicians, mystics, you name it, spiritual warriors. We have them on Fridays. And this Friday, I'll be sharing the mic with another host, which I don't normally do, but I'm looking forward to it. It will be me and Henrik Palmgren of Red Ice Radio together for a couple of hours, and we're going to be getting in some pretty interesting and thought-provoking territory. Not everybody will agree with the content or maybe how it will be delivered, but I guarantee you, you won't want to miss it. It will make you think, and it will certainly make you feel. So be a part of that this Friday. It's going to be 12 noon right here on Blog Talk Radio with my other show, Free Association Radio, featuring the Friday Farcast. So today we are talking about astrology, and we're going to get into Mars in Scorpio. It's a big change. It's a big shift. And we're going to look at how this impacts you personally. We'll go through Mars by the houses. We'll get into Mars as an energy. What does it mean? How does it manifest? And then we'll look at the added piece of Scorpio with Mars and how that will also transform and change the nature of Mars as it moves from the mostly peace-loving and balance-oriented sign of Libra and down into the pits of the underworld where Scorpio rules. And I guarantee you that the next few months, now Mars will move into Sagittarius on the 14th of September, the next few months are going to be very interesting with Mars and Scorpio, mostly because the energy is subterranean. It happens underneath everything. It happens in the underworld of your own life, and it happens in the underground places and spaces of our material world and our thought-driven holographic matrix reality that we are currently engaged with and populating at this point in time. So everything's going to have kind of an underworld effect. It starts in a volcanic fashion and becomes combustible beneath the surface and erupts upwards. So right off the bat, I can tell you we're going to be seeing some very interesting activity as it relates to volcanoes. So keep that in mind. keep your eye on Yosemite because it's going to be really important in terms of volcanic activity, seismic activity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A strange freak accident happened over the weekend in Venice Beach where there was a freak lightning storm that struck and injured 14 people and killed one, a 20-year-old man. This is highly unusual for the Venice Beach area and seemed as though it was in some ways intentional because rarely do they get lightning storms and rarely does lightning reach down far enough to affect the lives of 15 people and terminally ending the life of one. So Uranus in Aries, if we're looking at cosmic weather, Uranus in Aries is a big deal. And I would have no doubt that that would be playing some form of a role in terms of all of this. I'd have to go back and kind of look at what was happening in Venice at that time. One of my favorite movies of all time, by the way, is Z-Boy. Z-Boy and what is it? Z-Boy in Dogtown. It's not the Lords of Dogtown. That was Stacy Peralta's follow-up, his cinematic portrayal of the Zephyr crew, who were the radical skaters that came out of Venice in the Venice Pier. It's a great movie. It's a great documentary. It's a little tilted, a little slanted, and basically Stacy says that they're the ones that invented extreme skateboarding, and to some extent they're right. Craig Stesick played a huge role in the propagandization of extreme skateboarding. He was like the Edward Bernays of young skateboarders. He photographed everything. He videotaped everything. He turned it into kind of a postmodern narrative where these kids were repopulating schools and drained swimming pools to come up with an aesthetic and an ethic that was edgy, outside the lines, punky, anarchic, individual. It was great for Craig Stesick's career. It was great for Stacy Peralta's career as well. Stacy went on to become kind of a skateboard mogul and started doing videos, and he's the guy that brought Tony Hawk to the public's perception. And unfortunately, Stacy lost his son last year, Austin, and he was a very talented jazz keyboard player. And there was a lot of strange energy around Austin's death. He was young, and he was on a label in Southern California, an interesting label called Flying Lotus, and it had, kind of odd occultic undertones, as we have seen with some people that pass too early or pass at strange times. And I saw Z-Boys again just last week, and my heart goes out to Stacy losing his only son. And I'm a father with an only child as well, so I can understand and empathize with him deeply in terms of whatever grief or challenges he's going through as a result of this. Speaking of kids, I went to Burleson this weekend with my son. It was a Little League tournament. It was the last of the season. And I'm going to be a little self-indulgent here and just kind of talk about this because it relates to life and it relates to Mars and Scorpio. And I'm going to tie this all together. So hang in there with me, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this. It's kind of a confessional moment too. So my son started playing select baseball about in March, which happens to be the month of his birthday and the month of his grandmother's birthday. They're both Pisces. And this was his first time playing with a select team. And it was an interesting experience because he was the new kid on the block. And being new to Texas, that's been our experience for the last 2 years. And so being a new kid on the block, they had to assess his talent and find a place for him. Now, he had a very good tryout, which is why he got on the team. And we started playing, and early on, it was kind of apparent to me from maybe about the third or fourth game, fifth game, that he was being challenged big time by the head coach, the manager of the team, and challenged to the point where it was almost feeling personal. that my son was a scapegoat. Now, this is not uncommon in sports. I played a fair amount of football growing up, and I know how coaches, especially in football, work. They will find one kid on the team. It's usually somebody who's a little off, a little different, maybe not as talented. Sometimes they may have an agenda to get the kid to play better, and they will target that kid. And that kid will become the scapegoat of the team. And he will take on the burden or the trouble or the pain or whatever that is for the team. And this is not unlike in wolf packs. They have an animal called the omega wolf. And the omega wolf is the wolf that becomes kind of like the fool, or again, he is the scapegoat of the wolf pack. What's interesting about the omega wolf is that after the alpha, he's the one that eats next. So even though he is sort of the butt of the psychic pain of the pack, he's also highly valued. And of all the wolves that can peel off and start another pack, it is the omega wolf which can do that. So the omega wolf performs a very important social function and ultimately becomes the alpha in a new wolf pack. It's a fascinating sort of slice of social and group dichotomy and interaction in nature. And since wolves really parallel human experience quite a bit, I believe we have some of that in our lives as well. So my son played this role early on, and I could see where it was happening and how it was happening. And for me, it was a challenge because there were moments where it definitely felt personal. Now, the manager of the team, I actually looked at his planets, and he was a Libra with a moon in Aquarius, but guess what? He had Mars in Scorpio. And this is a very interesting development, very, very interesting. So my son would, complain, and with some degree of kind of, self-righteous indignation or righteous indignation. It wasn't that he wasn't receiving this treatment sort of randomly. I believe it was targeted at him, and I had to keep an eye on it. I had to make sure that it didn't cross any lines. And I also did not want to interrupt and disrupt his potential relationship with the team. It was very important for me to make sure that that was kind of sacrosanct, and that he could, at some point, if needed to, be integrated into the team. That was really an important piece. I didn't want to stir up too much stuff and have him be even more kind of excoriated and put into the cast off or cast out bucket. And I did have an early conversation with the coach, which did not necessarily go well. And that, again, caused me to kind of step back a little bit. And so I worked with my son, and I kept telling him that this is what life brings us sometimes. It brings us people that have that will bring us challenging experiences, they will challenge us, they will force us to confront things about ourselves and about life, and that we have to be able to stay open. And in this instance, I use the metaphor of bamboo, which is bend, not break. And after a lot of practices, I'd have to get inside of his head and, and kind of work with him, inside of his heart, and work with him to keep his spirits up. And, he listened to me, and thank God he listened. I don't know if he'll always listen to me, but at 10 years old, he was listening to me. And he basically did what I was sharing him to do, which was to hang in there and to get better and to work harder and to try to let some of this roll off of his back or listen to it when he needed to. And it was definitely not easy. There were times when the certain manager was away from practice, and he said, good, I'm glad, we'll have an easier practice. But a major thing happened. A couple major things happened. Number one, he got better. That's really important. He got better. He got more focused, and so he was improving as a player, which was important, right? It's important, but he was also improving his character. He was also improving his ability to deal with challenging life circumstances. And then there was a time, and I think I might have talked about this in the show, it was about a month ago, and he was playing third base in practice, and we're getting geared up for a big tournament to qualify for this regional tournament that we were in on Saturday. And the coach that I'm referring to was hitting ground balls to him and ironically, his son, both playing the same position, and they both played third base. And the coach he was hitting him quite hard, and hit a smoking ground ball to my son, and it wound up hitting him in the mouth. And his bottom teeth went through his bottom lip. And so there was a lot of blood, and we had to take him to the hospital, and I had to get him stitched up, and it was a big deal. It was a really big deal. He came back 2 days later, and he wound up saving the no-hitter for the coach's son on a good play from third base. So we came full circle with all that. Remember now, this is Mars and Scorpio. This is Mars we're talking about. And I have Scorpio in my 12th house. So this coach's Mars was in my 12th house. Okay, very important to note. So what are we talking about? We're talking about hidden enemies. That's what the 12th house represents. It's what's hidden. Traditionally, Mars is, in the 12th house, the sign of hidden enemies. Mars, aggression, violence, 12th house, hidden. 6th house, the open space where your enemies are kind of out there dancing around, waving their guns or tomahawks or bows and arrows or swords or knives or switchblades or whatever they are, right? But this is the 12th house, behind the scenes. So what's interesting about this is that my father also had Mars in the 12th house. And this didn't occur to me until this weekend. And my situation growing up with my father was volatile. And he was a person that had a lot of baggage that he had to work out as a child. And more importantly, as an adult. He was abandoned by his mother and then sort of disenfranchised by her, even though he eventually came back into her life. There wasn't any love there. Her son was opposed. His Mars, her son was in Taurus, his Mars in Scorpio, so we had a Sun-Mars opposition. His father, my paternal grandfather, died in an automobile accident because he'd had too much to drink. He was an alcoholic. And so my father never really got to know him as a teenager or an adult. I certainly didn't get to know him. And so my father brought all of this anger and rage, his Mars in Scorpio, and he was a Libra rising, so he had Mars in his second house. He brought it all to our lives as a family. And, this is where living in the 60s and the 70s was really tricky, because as children of the 60s and the 70s, we were dealing with parents who had not done work on themselves. These were parents that were children of the Depression era parents, people who had nothing. They had no emotional assets, no emotional currency, and sometimes very little on the physical side. So these are kids that were brought up with an emotional and often at times a economic sense of poverty. And then they had to come into the world and start families. And so they were already dealing with 1 foot. They were behind the 8 ball already. Psychology or any of the spiritual systems that a lot of us take for granted now, they just weren't around. So a lot of these people just kind of had to do it or live their lives or piece it together or figure it out on their own. And to my father's credit, he kind of did this in his own way down the line. But when he was young, he was a time bomb that would go off. He was explosive. And it was Mars in my 12th house. And I really had to deal with that. It was a challenging situation. I'm a Scorpio rising. So that meant that as a Scorpio rising, I had to figure out what was going on in my environment. Because if my father was in a bad mood or a weird mood or he had too much to drink, I knew things could go south in a hurry. So I had to read the room. I had to read the man. I had to read the situation. Scorpio rising, which has helped me because I can read things. I can read people. I can read charts. It was part of my training. And this is how astrology works. These things become part of who we are, and hopefully we transform them, especially in the nature of Scorpio. And then they become part of us, and we use them as tools to create a life. It's alchemy. It's what it is. It's astrological alchemy. from the dark into the light, from the base element to the higher. So anyway, this Mars and Scorpio piece with my father was getting played out again. And again, it took me until this weekend to really figure this out. Why? Because Mars transited into Scorpio, into my 12th house. So here we have the synchronistic sort of timing and magic of astrology. And what I figured out, and this is what happened, I told my son, I said, at some point, he is going to gain respect for you. And when he does it, he will tip his cap to you, and you will know that you have passed an important initiation in your life. And that happened this weekend. First of all, once he had the ball go off of his mouth, the coach started to back off, and he wasn't as insistent or hard on him. And my son, being as Pisces with a Cancer rising, trust me, he appreciated that. And I had to kind of work with him on it as well, because he was still engaged in the mindset that he was being persecuted. It's a Pisces thing. And I said, look, I'm watching blank. His energy's changing. He's respecting you. We need to reevaluate our position on this. He's been an ally for us in many ways. You know, he's been the kind of the dark ally, and we've had to, or the adversary, the worthy adversary. That's what Castaneda calls it. And now we need to shift our relationship with him, because he's not playing that role anymore. And for us to continue to hold him in that way, or to keep him framed that way, would be doing, number one, the process a disservice, and number two, even the human himself a disservice, because so many times we put people in boxes and we put them in frames, and we like to keep them there because they are our convenient frames of reference. That if we do that, then we are able to feel like our world makes sense. This person is X, Y, and Z, and if they always remember X, Y, and Z, it gives us a static point of reference for everything else. Because if we don't, then we're always in the place of reevaluation, which is a part of astrology. The mutable signs are about reevaluation. It's important to reevaluate. We cannot stay stuck or static. So I was sharing with him, this is important. We need to recast his role, recast his identity, change our relationship with him. He's changing his relationship with us. I can feel it. And sure enough, on the final game of the season, the game that was the most important game for us to stay in this tournament, my son played the entire game. He played all 6 innings. When they had an opportunity to sub him out, they did not. He played the entire game. To me, this was the symbolic tip of the cap. You earned it. You play the whole game. And my son comported himself great over the entire weekend in terms of baseball. He did great on the baseball level. He's become I'm proud of him. He's become a really good baseball player. And he's not afraid of pitching. Fast pitcher, the kid has heart. It's an amazing amount of heart. So baseball has been a really good life learning and metaphorical experience for us. And then it dawned on me. This was the alchemical aha. It was late at night, and I was hanging out with one of the team dads, who was a Pisces, and it dawned on me, Pisces like my son, it dawned on me that what was happening was that this manager was my father. He was my father. It was weird, right? He was my father, Mars and Scorpio. He had Mars and Scorpio, or has Mars and Scorpio, just like my father did, in the 11th house. And my son was me. He was me. And what happened between my father and I is that there was nobody on the wing helping me out. You know, I had to go through this initiation with him alone. My mother was AWOL. You know, she was not, she was there, but she was checked out. You know, trauma does that to people. So I got to play this really kind of amazing role where I was and I get choked up when I think about this. I was the kind of the disembodied voice that I never had. Very weird. And so I was talking my son through this experience to get him to the other side. And it was me. That's what was happening. It was me. My son was me. So I was healing my own relationship with myself. And then you begin to think about, do these people even exist? Does the manager exist? Does my son exist? I mean, it was really a trippy kind of moment. And it was all kind of, right there in the holodeck. So this was a very important kind of moment in time for me. And my son, and I can't speak for the manager. Maybe it was for him too. I don't know. I can't begin to understand that. But I do know that it was profound, absolutely profound. I'm still blown away by it. So when people ask you, does astrology have any merit? Does astrology have any kind of meaning? I don't believe in astrology. I got into this with a woman on Facebook who is a Vedic astrologer, and she basically told me that Western astrology was bullshit, and that Vedic astrology, which is the most closely aligned to sidereal astrology, was the real deal. And I told her, no, I beg to differ. This was one experience that was very clear for me with Mars in my 12th house in Scorpio. Now, hopefully, this will only be my Mars 12th house Scorpio moment, because the general vibe and consensus with Mars in the 12th house is hidden enemies. Well, hopefully, after today, I'll have one less hidden enemy, and then we can move on to the ally phase. So Mars we'll look at Mars. Why don't we do this? I'm a half an hour into the show. We play a little bit of music, and then what I'm going to do is on the other side, we're going to get into Mars in terms of the energy, and we'll get into it with Scorpio, and we'll go sort of house by house. And then you can, if you know your chart, maybe you want to play along, so give you some time to punch your chart up and find out where Scorpio is on the cusp. Whatever house it's on, that's where Mars is going to be showing up or is already there. Okay, so let me play some music, find your charts, we'll get into Mars house by house by house, and we'll work this out, and then I'll talk about Mars from a global level. And that'll be a very interesting discussion and conversation to have. It's a big one. It's a very big one considering the times we're in. All right, so you're listening to the 11th House. I'm your host, Robert Phoenix. And here is Magma, speaking of Mars and Scorpio and underworld and volcanism. I'll be back in 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Get your charts punched up. We're going to school. that track always ends quite abruptly. It's magma, and 3 minutes and 50 seconds of kind of interesting ambient rock. I was talking about wolves earlier, and how do I connect the dots here, make a transition? The Wolfman of American Spirit Radio, or it's not American Spirit Radio, Wolf Spirit Radio, Dave Corso has passed away. And some of you might know some of the hosts on Wolf Spirit. There's JP, Katie Galante, of course, has been a part of that community, and Stuart Swerdlow and a number of other people. And Dave passed last week, and it was a big, big loss to a lot of people that were connected to Dave and that network. And he was a total wolf guy. He had a pack of wolves, and he was the actual alpha of those wolves in Pahrump, Nevada. And Dave, of course, was a soldier in the Vietnam War, and they became a soldier of fortune and became very close to the super soldier community and had a lot of interviews and connections with people like Duncan O'Finian and some of the early, the first generation of super soldier abductees and traumatized men who were trained to kill for war. Born Legacy has a lot of the super soldier sort of material and themes in it. Montauk Boy, super soldier theme material. You want to check some of that out. You want to watch the Born Legacy. Anyway, Dave passed away, and wherever you are, Dave Corso, I hope you are clearly at peace with your next phase and your next mission in life. So my heart goes out to a lot of the Wolf Spirit Radio people who were connected to and miss Dave. So maybe this is a good transition to get into Mars, since Dave was a warrior. He was a spiritual warrior. Mars is the planet of the essence of will and expression and dynamism and war, action. And if you want placidity, you want harmony, you want beauty, hang out in Venus. But if you want to test yourself, if you want to go to the front, you want to have that adrenaline rush, you tap into Mars. And Mars in Scorpio is a very powerful combination. If you go back in time, not too long ago, by the way, before the turn of not this last century, but the one before that, remember that one, the 20th century? We are clearly in the 21st century now. There's no looking back, folks. But if you go back into the 19th century, the ruler for Scorpio was not Pluto, it was Mars. And so we have this exaltation, right, with Mars and Scorpio. And one of the things that Mars and Scorpio as a aspect, let's say you have it in your chart, people that have Mars and Scorpio in their charts are very powerful people. They are not to be underestimated, and they are not to be messed with. They will always find a way to level the playing field, and not in the same way that Mars and Libra would. Mars and Libra would level the playing field through some form of negotiation, some form of establishing protocols, determining what's fair, what's right. It will not level the playing field in the same way. Mars and Scorpio will level the playing field on psychological terms and will do anything within its power to do that, and is often quite sophisticated. Now, one could use the word cunning with people that have Mars and Scorpio, but you'd have to look at the rest of the chart to understand if that was the case. Now, Mars and Scorpio oftentimes is a great leveler. And there's I would say that there's actually some moral authority behind Mars and Scorpio in some ways. I've seen it. It's a shamanic element, Mars and Scorpio, because Mars is action, it's dynamism, and Scorpio takes you right into the underworld. That's the realm of the shaman. So people that have Mars and Scorpio can go into the dark. They are not afraid of it. They will go into the dark. They will find themselves. They will find other things along the way, and they will resurrect, and they will use that energy for whatever purpose they need, whether it's making money, whether it's building something, whether it's sharing knowledge. It does not go through a process. It does not happen unless it's gone through a process of some form of deeper psychic integration. Now, if Mars is afflicted, that's always a challenge. And perhaps my father's Mars is afflicted. I'd have to look at his chart. But the impetus is there. It's all about what happens along the way. So a square to Mars could make it quite difficult. Let's say it's a Saturn square. People who have Mars and Scorpio with a Saturn square may be very, very challenged to work with that energy, and they may come out very awkwardly or violently at times. And it may take them a long time to understand their own personal power, because Saturn will always denote the lesson, the long lesson, the lesson that takes sometimes a lifetime to learn and to master. So we can see somebody with Saturn squaring Mars, and it doesn't have to be Scorpio, it can be any sign, where they have to master self-control. They have to understand the nature of anger. What are they rebelling against? Are they repressing it? If they're repressing it, then what do they do with it? How do they turn it into some form of practical and dynamic and useful energy versus energy that will eat them away through frustration and repression and all the other forms of energetic sort of denial that we would assume or associate or relate with Saturn square Mars. So Mars in Scorpio is very, very powerful. The other thing about Mars and Scorpio is sexual. It's a very sexual sign. It's a sexual aspect. And there is something that people who have Mars and Scorpio have, that they may not be the most attractive people in the world, but people will feel it and say, wow, this person's got some juice, right? Regenerative juice. And so that's another part of Mars and Scorpio. Saw that with my father, again, using him as a case study. You know, he was actually a handsome guy, but he had Mars and Scorpio. And from a young age, I watched women kind of swoon for my father. It was very interesting from the outside to watch. So there is a regenerative and sexual energy associated with Mars and Scorpio. Sometimes if you have Mars in the 8th house, which is like having Mars and Scorpio, it can be very similar. So why don't we go around the houses, and we're going to look at, for the next segment of the show, how Mars and Scorpio will affect you. So if you've taken some time, you've got your chart in front of you, let's take a trip around the chart. Let's start with the first house. And let's say Mars is in Scorpio and it is transiting your first house. But one of the things that you're going to be dealing with between now and roughly September 14th, give or take the degree of your ascendant, we all have to put that into perspective as well, is that you're going to be working on personal power. Plain and simple personal power. What it is, how you deal with it, how you manifest it, who it impacts. Now, theoretically, and this is how astrology works, you'll have had a cycle of Mars going through your 12th house already. So you will have dealt with frustration. You will have dealt with the hidden enemy. Perhaps the hidden enemy is the enemy within you. You'll have dealt with these subjects. You'll have grappled with the intensity. You'll have grappled with the adversity. And then now, theoretically, you'll have the ability to bring that out into the open. You can own it now. It doesn't own you. And then you can be very creative. You can be dynamic. You can be assertive. You can be regenerative. If you are engaged in the healing arts of any kind, and you have Mars and Scorpio and it's in your first house transiting, then you're going to be able to really make a very strong push in terms of your own personal work, in terms of your own personal energy, your identity, putting yourself out there into the world. It's going to be almost like a period of resurrection. After a fallow period or a time spent where you're dealing with this behind-the-scenes Mars, now here's a push. And you can really change people's lives with Mars and Scorpio in the first house. So again, this is a profound kind of impact, the first house being our immediate world around us, the people we know, the lives we touch, the places we go to, how the world sees us, all that stuff. So if you've got Mars transiting in your first house, not only will you have an impact on the world around you, but you'll also be transforming your own nature, your own identity. It's very important to understand this. And you do this by being active, by asserting your will. And the more that you assert your will with Mars and Scorpio in the first house transiting, the more you will change your identity, the people around you, your environment. You want to take advantage of this. You want to take advantage of the energy. It's important. Now, again, we'd have to look at all the other planets that are connecting and interacting with that Mars. But just on that basis alone, it would be important for anyone going through this transit to be active, to get into shape, to change and transform not only one's body or features, but their emotions and their inner life, which will go along with it. It's all symbiotic. It's all one. Okay? Let's go down to the second house. Mars in the second house. The second house is values, its resources, its principles, its precious metals, it's your own money, and it is the foundation of the rest of the chart in a lot of ways. It is in my estimation, it is the first and second chakra kind of combined, because the first chakra is our safety chakra, it's our security chakra, right? It's grounding. It's a big second house kind of metaphor, but it's also kind of a second house or a second chakra, because it goes along with the second house. And it is a sexual kind of manifestation. Taurus is a very sexual, physical, bodily sign. So if you have Mars transiting your second house in Scorpio, what do you want to do? You want to look at where your money is. You want to look at where your assets are. You want to see if this is a time where you could tap into other people's money, which is Scorpio. Maybe this is a really good time to do some investing. It could be a very lucrative and positive time if you have the right insight, if you have the right connections, other people's money, Scorpio, and you have the right information. So if you have Mars transiting your second house, you would say to yourself, how can I improve my lot in life? How can I regenerate my finances? How can I look at my values and my principles and regenerate those as well? Maybe this would be a good time for you, since it's Taurus, that you want to evaluate your body. Maybe you want to get into a training program. This would be a time, especially first house, second house. If you have a Mars transit of the first or the second house, maybe you want to get into some kind of martial arts training, right? Maybe it's MMA. I've actually told that to people who have Mars transits at times. Go out and find a trainer. Go out and do some MMA. Go out and find some MMA-styled conditioning and cardio, which they have. Boxing would be great. So again, with Mars in the second house, we're talking about our physicality and running energy. It's important when you have Mars in the second house to run the energy, because Mars is a fire sign and the second house is earth-oriented. So you can get over anxious or frustrated at times with Mars in the second house. Taurus moves slow. Mars moves fast. So what you want to be able to deal with Mars in the second house is tempering your frustrations. So you got to run the energy. You've got to find a way to make that energy flow better, so that you're not fighting against yourself or fighting against your own principles or fighting against your own values. You want to use Mars in your favor, right? Run the energy. Sex could be a very, very powerful time for you with Mars in the second house. If it's transiting, you have the right partner in your life, it could be really powerful. Again, very transformational in terms of the body sense. You may want to look into Tantra as a practice with Mars and Scorpio going through the second house. But in any case, what you want to do is you want to reevaluate your values, reevaluate your finances, reevaluate your connection to terra firma, and then use that Mars energy to go after it and make changes, okay? That's where you want to focus with Mars and Scorpio transiting your third house. Second house, rather. When we get to the third house, we're dealing with the house of Gemini. Now, you could have anything in your third house, but obviously in this case, you would have Scorpio in your third house. Right? Am I right? Yes, I'm right. So that would mean if you have Scorpio in your third house, you would have Libra on your second house, which would make you a Virgo rising. Interesting. We can take into account the rising sign as well with some of these transits, because now you have potentially a Mars ascendant, depending upon what degree your ascendant is, a Mars ascendant sextile, which means you would be working on your identity even though Mars isn't in the first house, right? Making sense here? Yes, I am. So with Mars in Scorpio in the third house, a little tricky here because the third house is the world around you, right? It is travel on a local basis. It is learning, early childhood education, grades K through, I would say even high school, right? Let's just, or K through middle school. Figure out your own demarcation with that. It is friends, well, actually it's relatives, and it's your brothers and sisters, extended family, and it is writing and communication. So when Mars is in the third house, you want to be careful with driving. I'm being dead serious with this. You want to make sure that when you're driving around town, you are on the lookout for A, aggressive drivers, and B, watch out for your own aggression. You don't want to get in a road rage with Mars transiting your third house, especially in Scorpio. You just don't want to do that, right? So now it may be a good time for you to actually get into your car and look at what's going on with your car and maybe regenerate parts of your car, whatever that is. Likely it's going to be the engine. Sometimes if we're dealing with fluids are Piscean, but sometimes it could be scorpionic. Certainly with electrical current, it would be very Scorpio. And in fact, I've got to do that with my car. I got a battery issue with my car. So even though Mars is not transiting my second house, it would be kind of an appropriate example of that, or third house rather. So, look to your own personal mode of travel with Mars in the third house. You can be very argumentative with Mars and Scorpio in the third house. You can be very confrontational with Mars and Scorpio in the third house. But the idea here would be to get to the bottom of something, right? Because Scorpio takes us into the underworld. And it's not about, painting and dancing around the details in the sky, or it's not about sort of understanding the ground rules, which would be Earth. No, this is going beneath the surface and getting to the bottom of something. So with Mars and Scorpio in the third house, investigative work really takes off. And that'd be a great dynamic and activity with Mars in the third house. If you want to, in some ways, we can get into the third house. We can also get into the eighth house. But Mars and Scorpio could be genealogical work, because if you're dealing with extended family and you're dealing with legacy, which would be Scorpio, eighth house, Mars and Scorpio in the third house could be good for that. Find out who your ancestors are. You can do a lot of the research. It'll be a third house thing with the research, right? If you are a writer, Mars and Scorpio is a very powerful element to begin a writing project. So if you have Virgo on the ascendant, attention to details, Mars and Scorpio says, let's go. Let's make this happen. Let's start this project. Let's get into some writing. It would also be a good time if you have any issues with your brothers and sisters or extended family. Use Mars and Scorpio to get to the bottom of it. Try to keep your head clear and your anger to a minimum. And I know that family brings up issues for people. Now, I don't have any brothers or sisters, and my extended family doesn't really stay in touch with me. And that's because I'm an 11th house guy, and you are my extended family, believe it or not. So, but I understand the brother-sister dynamic, or the cousin, or the uncle, or whatever that is, right? So Mars and Scorpio would say, explore this. If you have any blocks on a psychic level, Mars and Scorpio will eliminate them or help you get to the bottom of them between your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, your nephews, you name it, okay? These would all be appropriate applications for Mars and Scorpio in the third house. Let's go to Mars in the fourth house. This is a tricky place for Mars. Now, here we would have a square to the ascendant, right? Because we're dealing with the ascendant as a cardinal point. And in this case, the ascendant would be in the sign, let me go back here. So if you have Cancer on the second, you would have, Scorpio on the third. So again, it would be kind of like a You would see Cancer on the 4th. You would have Gemini on the 3rd. And so it would almost be like, well, hold on a second. I'm sorry. Scorpio on the 4th, Libra on the 3rd, and Virgo on the 1st, 2nd, and then you would have Leo on the ascendant. My bad. So we're getting into the square here, the nature of the square between the 4th and the 1st, the 1st being Leo, and in this case, the 4th being Scorpio. So now we get into the square energy. Not as easy to use as the sextile energy from the 3rd to the 1st, or sorry, the 3rd to the 1st. So we're getting into square energy, and Mars in the 4th house is challenging, especially in Scorpio. Now, if you have a house project that you want to get into, it's great because now we're getting into regeneration of your living structure or your home. That's a powerful Mars and Scorpio transit. And it would be highly recommended that you would use Mars and Scorpio in the 4th house to get into your pipes, to get into your plumbing, to get into your electrical. You know, maybe you want to redecorate, maybe you want to do some foundation work. Whatever that energy is, Mars and Scorpio in the 4th house says, do it. This is the time. This is the place. If you don't do it, then what happens is that Mars and Scorpio in the 4th house gets internalized, and you have conflict in the home. Very, very basic example is, let's play this out. Let's say you and your partner are living at home, and the partner says, honey, we got to get to our plumbing. Last year, our pipes froze. We had issues. They broke. We don't want to do that again this year. We don't want to go through that. Let's go in and redo our pipes, and I need your help. Right? Maybe we're going to do this by ourselves. Maybe we're going to hire somebody. I need you to supervise it. And then you say, okay, well, let's get that done. But, you know, one thing leads to another, and you're off busy doing some other part of your life, and now all of a sudden that Mars becomes an issue. You're not taking care of what's happening in the home, and so the frustration comes out, the anger comes out, and now you have a conflict in the home because you haven't dealt with the appropriate energy of Mars in the 4th house. This is how this kind of works, or it's an example of it. So what would you rather do? Would you rather have the conflict in the home, or would you rather have the ability to go down into whatever it is you're working on, change it, and regenerate it? If you are in the process of buying and selling homes, this is a great time to actually look at buying a home and flipping it. You've got a couple of months to do it. Why not, right? Why not? Go for it. So if you have the money, the resources, Mars and Scorpio, and you've got a Mars 4th house transit, and you've got some extra income, buy a house you can flip if the market will handle it. Another issue or another example of Mars in the 4th house, and this is about legacy in some ways, because the 4th house is about where we came from and our roots, right? So it would be about looking back in some ways. And it might be your own personal journey to look at the violence of Mars that took place in your own home or your own upbringing. And here we have the opportunity to heal. Just like I had the opportunity to heal with Mars in my 12th house, this could be an opportunity for you, if you have Mars and Scorpio in your 4th house, to get into that process and regenerate that, resurrect that, forgive, whatever it is you need to do with Mars and Scorpio in the 4th. Looking back on your own experience of growing up, living in your home, and seeing the role that Mars played. Okay? Very, very important. For some people, Mars and Scorpio in the 4th house could actually also indicate conception. That's right, because we're talking about birth, right? Cancer, the great nurturer, the mother. There's Mars there. There's Scorpio there. There's energy there. There's sex there. This is 2nd house energy, right? So we could also be looking at fertility, sexual fertility in the 4th house. If you've been having an issue or challenge getting pregnant, maybe Mars in the 4th house would be a really good time for you to continue that process, right? But sometimes that process is really fun, enjoyable, so why not? And I guess maybe Mars and Scorpio, if you wanted to open your own restaurant, could be also a very, very, very good time. Can also be some healing with Mars and Scorpio in the 4th house. So the idea with Mars and Scorpio, though, is to stay on top of the energy. Anytime you're dealing with Mars, you want to stay on top of the energy. You want to work with the energy. You don't want it to work you, no matter what house it's in, because then we get into conflict-based energy. All right, let's go to Mars in the 5th house. All right, so let's say you've got Mars transiting your 5th house. What does that mean in Scorpio? Well, it can be really fun, first of all, because what does the 5th house rule? Children, passion, love, pastimes, all the stuff that we associate with the 5th house, pleasure, romance, the heart. Mars transiting your 5th house, man, that's hot stuff. That's really, really hot stuff. I mean, it's like going out, playing, having fun, being social, having the social experience be a regenerative one. It's about finding a pastime and enjoying that pastime, whatever that is. It's summertime. Maybe it's water skiing. Maybe it's spelunking in caves. Whatever you're into, Mars says throw your passion into it. And I believe that when people have a Mars 5th house transit, that energy, if they work it correctly and right, when Mars transits into the 6th house, they can take something that they've invested their energy into and gotten passionate about and turn it into a work, right? Because the 5th house is play. And when you have Mars there, you can kind of really invest your energy in something you get turned on by, that you're passionate about, that you love and enjoy. And when it transits up into the 6th, it's like, hey, let's do something with this. Let's turn this from a pastime or a pursuit into an actual work. So if you have something that you are on the fence with that you really like and you're thinking about, flipping it and doing it on a more of a full-time basis or something that brings you extra income, this is a great time. This is a great time to invest that energy because you'll enjoy it and you'll get really good feedback from people, generally speaking, right? If you throw your passion into something, and let's just say it's really in alignment with you, and you're good at it, people will give you feedback. If you're not good at it, trust me, you'll get the feedback too. So Mars in the 5th house says invest. Put that energy into something you're passionate about, something you love. If it's with children, and you've got Mars in Scorpio in the 5th house, it's a good time to regenerate your relationships with children. If you've had some form of abuse in the past, or you've had some kind of intense Mars energy as it relates to children, again, since it's Scorpio, you can transform that. You can heal that. I know that there are people who are kind of on the fence with having kids because of some of the stuff that they've gone through in their lifetime, that they're afraid that they're going to explode. That was one of my issues growing up. I'm thinking, if I have a kid, I've got to be pretty clean before this happens, because I saw what happened with me and my father, and I waited until I was 44 years old to have a child. And for the most part, I think I was pretty intelligent with that decision and choice, because quite frankly, I had a lot to go through and get to the other side with. So Mars in the 5th house in Scorpio can help you again as it relates to kids, as it relates to some of the things that may have happened to you as a kid as well. It's a great time to invest in love and more. Mars, Scorpio, 5th house. If you've got Mars in the 5th house, have fun with it and enjoy the transformational and regenerative aspects of it. And seek out a pastime or a hobby and idea. Turn it into a real-time business or a occupation or vocation, which brings us to the 6th house. Mars in the 6th house, transiting the 6th house in Scorpio. What is your work? Do you like it? Is it your calling? Mars transiting your 6th house in Scorpio says you have the opportunity to regenerate and transform your life work. That's how Mars in the 6th house works, especially in Scorpio. You get to get down with it, and you get to feel as though, well, this is not really what I'm here to do on this planet. Here's Mars in Scorpio. Well, what am I here to do? How can I find my purpose? Now, there are a number of ways that you can do that. Number one, you can do a lot of self-work and really tune into who you are. And you may have an idea as to who you are, but you may be afraid to kind of go for it, whether it's an economic piece or whether it's a social piece. Mars and Scorpio in the 6th house kind of demands that you look at it, right? That's what it does. If you have no clue, sometimes an astrologer can help. I've worked with a lot of people on their vocations. We'd look at the true north of the chart, which is the true node, but we'd also look at the 6th house and the 10th house. So maybe it would be a good time for you to have some form of vocation consultation, whether it's with somebody like me or Maybe you take a series or batteries of vocational and career tests. So this is a time Mars is saying you got to deal with this. Not only have to deal with it, but you have to transform it. Now, the sixth house also relates to health. So Mars in Scorpio in the sixth house says get healthy. Get healthy. Look at a diet. Look at supplements. Look at exercise. Look to transform your condition. Look, we live in challenging times, really challenging times physically. I mean, we have no idea how chemtrails and all the other crap in our environment is affecting us. I think if we got I think if the CDC was really doing its job and they put out a report, we would be shocked, we'd be horrified. And the really disappointing part around all of this is that modern medicine, as it's evolved, has no clue whatsoever as to how to deal with some of this stuff. A good friend of the show, talked with her last week, and she's going through all these crazy symptoms, and her doctors don't know what to do. They can't pinpoint it. Well, I know what the cause of it is. I'm not a medical doctor, and I know what the cause of it is. Well, I may save that for a different show. But, Mars in the sixth house says you got to get down. You got to figure this out. And we're on our own. I hate to say that, but we're on our own with this stuff. So if you have been challenged physically and you've got Mars going through your sixth house in Scorpio, use the energy. It is time. Don't wait another day. It is time. Engage in your own healing process. And you don't have to wait for somebody who has a certificate or degree to tell you what to do or to show you the way or prescribe something. There's plenty of resources on the internet. And there's plenty of ways to research what you're going through. And I would say the first thing you can do right now, because we're talking sixth house, right? What is the sixth house? It's Virgo. What does Virgo represent? Virgo is the ninth sign of the zodiac. It is the ninth month. It is the harvest month. It is the fall. That is the time of the reaping of the bounty. So we're talking about wheat. Virgo is connected to grains and cereals, right? So Mars, Scorpio, sixth house, Virgo, grains. Look at your relationship to wheat. If you are sick or if you're not well and you keep taking whatever it is that your doctor is giving you, I would suggest that you reevaluate your relationship with wheat and gluten and drop it pronto. Mars, Scorpio, sixth house will help you do that. Trust me. Trust me on this. Doesn't matter, literally, obviously you're dealing with a Scorpio sixth house cusp anyway, but it doesn't matter what sign you are. I would say for the most part, you may want to just reevaluate wheat and gluten in general, but certainly with Mars going through your sixth house, transform your relationship with grains, which is Virgo, okay? Let's go up to the seventh house, which is the house of relationships. And if you have Mars, or Scorpio rather, on your seventh house cusp, that would mean that you're a Taurus rising, and relationships are very intense for you. They are your alchemical chalice, so to speak. That's where you go through the biggest part of your own personal transformation and change. So partnership brings it to you, and it changes who you are, transforms your identity through the descendant or the seventh house, the shadow of the ascendant. And with Mars going through your seventh house, there can be a time where people will argue. And now you're getting into the fixed sign polarities with Taurus on the ascendant and Scorpio in the seventh house. And those kinds of conflicts and arguments can be very damaging to a relationship, especially if we're into the fixed signs. And obviously we would be, since Mars is there in Scorpio. So if Mars is just getting there, is about to arrive there, your relationship is going to need some transformation. Your relationship is going to need some active and dynamic work on your part to change it and transform it. Now, the good news is that you can have some really good sex with Mars and Scorpio in the seventh house. Maybe it's even makeup sex. You get into an argument and makeup. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to be in denial. You don't want to let this Mars energy run rampant, because it will dominate the relationship, and it will ultimately destroy the relationship. So people, if you have Mars going through your seventh house now, use it to transform your connection. Use it to go deeper. Use it to understand the power and the nature of power in your relationships. Who has it? Who doesn't have it? Who feels disempowered? Why? What can you do to switch that around and change some of those things? Because Mars, Scorpio, it's all power. So it's a power kind of exploration with Mars in the 7th house. And ultimately, again, the idea is to regenerate. That's what Mars and Scorpio does. You want to regenerate your relationship. In terms of contracts, which is also a 7th house issue, you want to use some care. You want to go over contracts with a fine-tooth comb with Mars and Scorpio. Because what you don't want to do is sign a contract and then blow a fuse after you've signed the contract. So Mars requires that you get on top of the energy, you get on top of the language, you get on top of the communication. And you don't ride it to the point where the other person is being driven into the ground via submission, but you want to play an active role. Okay, you don't want to be at effect. You want to be at cause with Mars in the 7th house. Trust me on this. Okay. All right, we're moving into Mars in the 8th house. Now, this is really intense, very, very powerful. I have Mars in the 8th house natally. I know a little bit about that energy. So you're going to have Mars transiting Scorpio. You've got an 8th house Scorpio. You're already kind of an intense person to begin with, number one. So Mars in the 8th house in Scorpio is going to take you down, 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 down into the labyrinth. It's going to take you down into the psychic underbelly of your own life. You may be dealing with your own legacy. You might be dealing with somebody who is on the verge of leaving this plane with Mars, Scorpio transiting your 8th house and dealing with things like wills and their legacy that they will leave to you. It's also a time for you to examine your own personal legacy. What are you about? What drives you? How will people remember you? Do you want to be remembered? How do people feel about you right now? Now, is it really important to care about how other people think? No, not really. But I think it's important to understand, how you will imprint this world. What will people leave? What will you leave people with, right? What will you leave people with? After you're gone, dead and gone, what will people say about you? How will they remember you? Will it be important, right? Will it be? Because the Mars in the 8th house gets us into our life force, right? And so we begin to ask ourselves, what are we doing with our life force? How are we spending it? To what end? And if I do invest life force, well then, what happens after I'm gone? Where does that life force go? Will it live on? Will it change people? Where will I live on? So Mars in the 4th house and 8th house in Scorpio is all about life force. It's all about what we're doing with it and how we channel it and to what end. It's a very sexual kind of energy. Again, anytime you get Mars and Scorpio and any of the water planets or water houses rather, it's steamy, it's hot. It brings up a sense of urgency in terms of expressing that energy. So Mars and Scorpio in the 8th house can also deal with other people's money as well. The 8th house is a very complex house. How do you deal with other people's money? How can you tap into networks without being avaricious and greedy or manipulative, right? So Mars brings some of that out because there is this kind of urge with how do I get ahead? How do I tap into sort of these income streams that are out there that are not a part of my life? How do I get some of this? Mars and Scorpio will get you thinking along these lines. So if you want to look into investment or you want to look into some form of skill set that would, bring you closer to that kind of world, Mars says invest here. Invest. You have to watch out for violence with Mars in the 8th house. Okay, I think it's important. I tend not to be an old school astrologer, but we have to take this into account. We have to, bring this into our discussion. Mars in the 8th house can be very violent. So you need to, especially in Scorpio, so you need to be aware of where you are at times. You need to be aware of, who you're with. I would not suggest with Mars and Scorpio that you undertake any kind of underworld activities unless you are willing to roll with the lesson, the shamanic lesson, which would be life, death, and rebirth. If you're willing to sign off on that, then by all means, go to Las Vegas or go to Atlantic City, and see what happens. But again, you have to be willing to go to the end of the process with that, or whatever that underworld kind of, deeper, darker, more momentum will take you. Okay. Let's go to Mars in the ninth house. If Mars is transit in your ninth house, I would say get on your bad motor scooter and ride. You got to travel. You got to get out. You got to see the world. It's very important. Mars in the ninth house in Scorpio would help you regenerate from some other destination or some other place. It's summertime. There are actually some pretty good fairs out there. Don't let these disasters in the air freak you out. Okay? Don't let them do that. You can even get in your car and travel with Mars in the ninth house. And in Scorpio, again, it will regenerate your perspective, your perception, who you are in life, where you come from. It can be very, very powerful. Mars in Scorpio transit in the ninth house. Mars in the ninth house also will give the individual an opportunity to transform their belief system. Because again, we're dealing with Scorpio, right? And Mars is active and dynamic. And the ninth house represents belief systems, religions, Catholicism, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam. They're all kind of ninth house experiences. So Mars allows you to regenerate that. Very important. Very, very important. And what happens when you do? Well, then you become your own kind of spiritual arbiter. Now, sometimes it can be a conversion experience because there is an orthodox component to the ninth house. So you could actually go through something that would make you more of a Christian or more of a Catholic or more of a devout Muslim, whatever that is. That Mars energy will flip that switch. And you could go through a religious conversion. This is a really interesting story. This is one of the things that I watched while I was away, right, in Dallas, or Fort Worth. Again, this is a total Mars 12th house deal. I watched this show on the Discovery Channel about gangs. And the guy who wrote and produced the show Sons of Anarchy, he's been looking at these gangs. And he's very into sort of the whole gang psychology and gang culture and gang warfare. And the gang he was looking at was the Aryan Brotherhood. And I found this to be totally fascinating. I find gangs fascinating in general. But he was looking at the Aryan Brotherhood, which started in San Quentin in California, Northern California. And what I found interesting about this was, Mars is transiting my 12th house. What's the 12th house? It's hospitals, it's insane asylums, it's brothels, it's monasteries, and it's prisons. As I'm watching a gang documentary, on prisons in my 12th house while I'm, out in this baseball tournament. And what was fascinating about this is that there were two guys who both belonged to the Aryan Nation, Aryan Brotherhood, and AB, they call it Aryan Brotherhood, the brand. They call it the brand. And one of the guys went through a total religious conversion. And he had killed a couple guys, and, he was doing what the AB told him, and he nearly got killed by a member of the Black Guerrilla Nation, Black Guerrilla Family, BGF, down in Los Angeles. And he became a Christian. I'd like to look at his chart. And he just left it all behind. He went into solitary. He eventually got out. Now he's a minister. And now he's he's in an undisclosed location because he's afraid of his life. With a gang, once you're in, you're in. And you try to get out, and they will off you. They will take you out. So just watching his religious conversion take place was absolutely fascinating. He wasn't the only one. There was another guy. So what we're talking about here with the ninth house of Mars and Scorpio is a turning point. It's a turning point in one's own perceptions, one's own beliefs, so on and so on and so on. It's a powerful time for that. Travel and transforming what you believe in and why, and having some new active kind of expression of that. Okay? Let's go to Mars in the 10th house. If you've got Mars transiting your 10th house, it's a very powerful time for you in terms of your vocation and your work. You can be a real agent of change in the workplace. If you're a supervisor or you're in management, you can use that Mars Scorpio transit of the 10th house to make changes in your work world and your environment, whether they're structural or organizational or even within your own role. You can transform your role in a corporate setting with Mars and Scorpio transiting the 10th house. Or you can get even more focused and goal-oriented, and you can say to yourself, this is not for me. I want to do something else. Maybe I want to get out of the corporate world. Maybe I want to transform that. Maybe I want to be an entrepreneur. Mars in the 10th house would welcome that in some ways. Maybe this is the time you've been waiting for. So don't hesitate. Engage, change, transform. Mars, again, transforms what we have in terms of our identity as it relates to systems, the government, corporations, insurance companies, whatever it is, these big systems, these big oligarchic systems, Mars and Scorpio transforms them. So I would suppose that, at some point there's going to be a lot of people going through this Mars 10th house transformation, and you're going to see a lot of people waking up during this time, right? Trust me on this. You're going to see a lot of people waking up. And it's inevitable because of Mars's transit through the 10th house. People are going to get turned on. They're going to look at the underbelly of these institutions. The same with religion, by the way. Go back to Mars in the 9th house. People are going to see what's up. We're going to talk about Israel. We're going to talk about what's happening with Israel. I'm going to talk about it after I'm done with this. And then we're going to get into some free readings. But the revelation around religion is starting to really happen in a big way. So Mars in the 10th house would be the same thing, but it would be around government, corporations, Mars, Scorpio transformation, people waking up. All right. In your own chart, do you love what you do? If you do, then go deeper. Be more active. Take risks. Transform the lives of people around you. Maybe build a business. If you don't love what you love, then get out. Start a new business. Become an entrepreneur. Transform and change people's lives that way. Mars is in a fixed sign, right? And when you start stuff in a fixed sign, what's going to happen? It's going to take hold. You can't start during a cardinal sign, right? It's not bad. It's initiatory energy. But when you start something in a fixed sign, you're getting into it. So be sure that you know what you're getting into. It's important. But if you feel it, the commitment's there, then don't hesitate. Make it happen. All right, let's go to the 11th house. Groups, organizations, affiliations, utopia, the world of tomorrow. It's funny. My son and I were listening to Mike Ladd, and he's this spoken word hip-hop artist. And there's this track by Mike Ladd. He's nuts for it. It's called Mars Colonies. And it's kind of a Mars 8th house thing. Mars 11th house thing. And in the song, he says, where's my floating car? Where's my Mars colonies? Where's my floating car? My utopia, the way things were supposed to be, Space 1999. It's a great song. And he's talking about the future and how the future was processed to us as kids. How it was going to be so cool, right? Well, the future is now. So we're looking at Mars in the 11th house. And, look around the world around you. Is this the type of world you want to live in? Is this the utopia that we were all promised at one point in time, where cars would fly and food would be transformed instantly from a pill into some sort of third dimensional, delicacy? Are we living with free energy? Are we, we have some of that. We can, I'm doing this right now. We can talk to one another through Skype. I mean, there are things that are very futuristic that are happening on planet Earth. But Mars and Scorpio says, how do you feel about it? Do you feel good enough about it? Do you enjoy the type of world you live in? And do you want to stay in this kind of world? Mars and Scorpio says transform it. Transform your relationship to technology. Maybe get smarter. Maybe step down. Maybe step out. Whatever that is. Right? Mars and Scorpio, demands that you put some attention here and either go forward. And this is the thing with Mars and Scorpio. You either go forward and you go forward with conviction, or you go backwards and you go backwards with an attempt to regenerate. But you can't go backwards forever. Mars is a forward-moving energy. So you can only go backwards for a period of time so that you understand what you're trying to change or transform, and then you move forwards. You move forward with the information. If you go back too far, then you're dealing with Mars in a very, kind of astrologically inappropriate fashion. You're not taking advantage of the energy. It's about moving forward. In terms of friends, with Mars in the 11th house, you can be getting into conflict with friends, being challenging with friends. But you want to get to the bottom of challenges. You want to get to the bottom of conflict. You want to get to the bottom of any kind of long-standing issues with any friends you have. Mars and Scorpio will help you transform that. If you are into community and you want to start a community, or you have any kind of desire to create a more utopian experience for yourself and others, Mars and Scorpio in your 11th house would be great for that. If you want to get more sophisticated with technology, Mars and Scorpio in the 11th house is the time. Blogging, making videos, whatever that is. The energy is there in a big way. Sometimes you can use the energy also to become part of a group situation or start a group, or maybe you become the focal point of a group experience. Mars is that dynamic. Or maybe you want to transform your relationship to a group. Maybe you've outgrown a group and it's time to move on. Or maybe you've outgrown friendships and it's time to move on. Mars will facilitate that. So again, we're talking dynamic energy with Mars. Last one here, we're going into the 12th house. We've gone all the way around the chart. Mars in the 12th house is tricky. I've given you my own version of Mars in the 12th house, which I will experience more, no doubt. And remember, one of the things that Mars is going to go through, and it's happening right now, is it's squaring Jupiter, right? So we get into the Mars-Jupiter square, you got to watch out for pride and ego. Very important. Don't let your pride and ego get in the way with Mars squaring Jupiter. Now, you can use that for self-confidence. Why not? But too much, and then you're playing the fool. Mars will be transiting. I believe it's in August. We'll be transiting Saturn. It's going to cross Saturn for all of us. And that's going to be a very interesting and powerful time because Mars-Saturn transits, especially in a conjunction, are about frustration. So we're all going to go through it on some level together with our own individual house placements, okay? So Mars is not just this inert thing going through your charts. There's going to be some powerful happenings with Mars. There's going to be a trine to Chiron, which will facilitate great healing. There's a trine to Neptune right now, which means we need to be more compassionate. We need to be actively engaged in being compassionate and being agents of peace. Never more important than what's happening in the Middle East. If we want peace, we got to be peace, plain and simple. And that's where we start. Mars in the 12th house brings up intensity. It brings up our shadows. It brings up the specter of past life experience. Were you sacrificed in a past life with Mars and Scorpio? Were you a scapegoat with Mars and Scorpio or Mars in the 12th house? How do you deal with this sense of energy behind the scenes with Mars in the 12th house? And what does it mean for this lifetime? And I've got Mars transiting my 12th house. I'm in a really interesting line of work, right? So when Mars transits my 12th house, I am very aware of its transit. So, hey, look, the cat is out of the bag with me. Been out of the bag for a while. But still, I need to be aware of that Mars transit going through my 12th house. And so, luckily for me, what I did was I had my own Mars in the 12th house moment, which hopefully will have healed a lot of the issues with my father, or i.e. authority, Mars in the 12th house. A nice Mars 12th house activity would be volunteering. You could do that with the 6th house as well, by the way. If you are fine with your work and you're healed and you're feeling good with your body, what you may want to do is you may want to volunteer. And the 6th house represents small animals. So maybe you want to spend some time working at the vet, or hanging out at the vet and walking dogs, or doing some form of service with Mars in the 6th house. You could do it with Mars in the 12th house as well. Maybe you want to volunteer some time or donate some money or donate some clothes to halfway houses or shelters or whatever you can do to help people that are dispossessed and outside of the scope of society. That would be a really good Mars action. How can you help some of these people in these institutions? If you're looking for work, Mars in the 12th house says there's work here for you. You may want to look into one of these places. Maybe you want to work in a hospital. Maybe you want to work in a place where people are rehabilitating. Because it's another aspect of Mars in the 12th house is rehabilitation, halfway houses, recovery centers. Maybe you want to go there. Maybe you need to go there. Maybe this is time for you to bleed your demons and to get rid of the toxicity. If you have the time or the energy or the impetus, get away, go do it. Go get clean. That's another Mars 12th house kind of energy. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with Mars in the 12th house. It doesn't have to be inert. It doesn't have to be static. It can be dynamic, especially if it's in the service of healing on a spiritual level. That's what Mars does in the 12th house. All right, so there you go. I've given you your own Mars house by house experience. The rest is up to you. Look at the connections. What does Mars connect with? Understand the planets that are around Mars or transiting or connecting or disconnecting, whatever it is. I've given you the paint. Go take it to the canvas. All right, I'm going to play another piece of music here, and I'm going to get into free readings for the last half hour of the show. You're listening to me, Robert Phoenix, and this is the 11th House Radio. And what do I want to play? What do I want to play? All right, this is a track that, I want to keep it short. How about a little Reefer Man? 3 minutes and 32 seconds. Little Reefer Man. We haven't played this in a while. This would definitely be a Mars Scorpio 12th house experience. Here we go.
Say, did you ever meet that Reefer Man?
No, I never met the guy. Tell me about it.
Oh, no, you're not kidding me now, are you? You never met the Reefer Man? Oh, no, you never met the Reefer Man? And yet you say you swim to China and you wanted to sell me South Carolina? I believe you know the Reefer Man. Did you ever meet the funny Reefer Man? You never met the funny Reefer Man? And yet you say you walk the ocean anytime you take a notion? Yeah, I believe you've seen the Reefer Man. That funny Reefer Man? Have you ever met that funny Reefer Man? Oh, he trades your dimes for nickels and he calls watermelon pickles. Yeah, I'm talking about the Reefer Man. You ever meet that little old Reefer Man? Did you ever meet that little old Reefer Man? If he takes a sudden mania and he wants to give you Pennsylvania, I'm still talking about the Reefer Man. Have you ever met that little old Reefer Man? Ever met that funny little Reefer Man? If he sells Wall Street, is frantic, and because he won't sell on the Atlantic. Oh, that's that Reefer Man. With the Reefer Man. Yeah, Jim, I know the Reefer Man. If I claim I own a portion of the Rockefeller fortune, And you know I just left that reefer man. Yeah, I know the reefer man. Yeah, I'm well acquainted with the reefer man. So if I claim I have $1 billion and I want to trade it to you for $1 million, I just left that reefer man. How well I know the reefer man. Oh, I'm so well acquainted with the reefer man. So if you hear me snip and giggle, start to squirm and wiggle, oh, that little reefer man.
That is the Reefer Man. The more famous version of that was done by Cab Calloway in the movie, The Big Broadcast of 1938 with W.C. Fields, which featured a very early version of television in that movie. It is 1:33 here in Central Texas. You're listening to 11th House Radio. I'm Robert Phoenix, and we're going to get into a couple of free readings here in just a moment. I just wanted to get into the some specifics. We had some conversation in the chat room about the Mars-Saturn conjunction, which I was referring to earlier. That takes place on the 26th of August, and there's a couple of day run-up before that. So let's back that out to right around they say the 22nd of August, and we're moving into Virgo at that point in time. That is when Mars conjunct Saturn in everybody's chart, no matter where, where you have other planets. Mars and Saturn will conjunct in your chart, so we're all going to feel it, and that will be a very intense and powerful time. Could be very frustrating for a lot of people. So just keep your eyes on that, and just be informed and figure out how that might be able to change you or impact you, or how you can deal with that. Just on the world stage, this Mars Scorpio piece is very important. I did a show about 2 weeks ago on the chart of Israel, and I have Israel's chart up here right now. And the chart that I have has 0 degrees Scorpio as the ascendant for Israel, which means now Mars has moved out of the 12th house for Israel and is in the first house, which is open and active aggression. Mars Scorpio first house, and it is squaring the moon in Leo. Now, keep in mind that Jupiter in Leo has moved into the 10th house of Israel, which means that they are going to expand their identity in terms of their 10th house structure and 10th house form, which is the world stage and world opinion. And what's interesting is I spend a lot of time looking at alternative media, and so that's where I get my 411 from, and I had some time to look at mainstream media, and it's like we're living in 2 separate worlds based on the mainstream media and alternative media. It couldn't be any clearer now. We are occupying 2 separate realities on this planet, and if you haven't figured that out now, all you got to do is just watch mainstream media and the coverage of what's happening in Israel. Everything is so pro-Israeli on TV. It's not even funny. Even in newspapers. I was looking at a story on the SF Gate, which is the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper, and it shows 3 Israeli soldiers. They have their arms around each other. And one of the guys happens to be an Ethiopian. He's Jewish and Ethiopian, right? So he's part of the IDF, right? And there's a person of color in this picture. So they've got their arms around each other, mourning for the loss of their fallen soldier, the band of their brother, right? And this is the message that the mainstream media is sending. One guy has lost his life. Meanwhile, you do not see pictures of maimed and innocent babies and children on the SF Gate. You don't see that. You see this classic war-torn picture, and the amount of it's not the classic. It's not classic. What you see it's almost a cliche, or what they show is a cliche. And then they've got this Facebook site where they're throwing, like, it's kind of like during World War II, where guys who were serving overseas, these pinup models would sometimes they would mention them, or I think this is where the USO got started. Betty Grable, whoever would go overseas and show their legs or whatever, and there'd be this connection with, hey, you're our heroes, and we women find you really attractive, and we would spread our legs for you because you're killing other people in the name of democracy or keeping the world free. There's this whole page on Facebook set up for these IDF soldiers where women are pronouncing their love for them and how heroic they are. And does anybody do this for the Palestinians? No, they don't. They don't. Everything is just so slanted in this coverage. This is Jupiter, by the way, cruising up into the 10th house of Israel. And I know it's politically incorrect to talk about this. A lot of people take heat for this. I don't care. I have no problem talking about it. I've been talking about it for a couple of years now. I've gotten over my fear of this. So anyway, there's just a whole different sort of dynamic going on here. Now, Mars in Scorpio is the open aggression that's taking place. It's squaring the moon, which means that it's squaring the home or homeland, right? There's going to be a Mars-Pluto square, and they have Pluto in Leo, 12 degrees. And I'm going to tell you when this is going to happen. Put this on your calendar. The 17th and the 18th of August, when there's a Pluto-Mars square in the chart, the Israeli chart, something significant is going to happen. And it will either be some kind of major destruction and disruption of Palestine, Gaza, or there will be this impetus for a greater or larger war, which is, I think, on its way. I had a major night on Saturday night where I was getting a massive download of information, and a lot of it was quite dark, to be honest with you. So Mars in Scorpio is in the first house of Israel, and it's going to be squaring the moon. It's going to be squaring Pluto, and it's going to be squaring Saturn. Public opinion will change, and it will change based on one event that is going to be so sickening and so painful and so traumatizing that the perception of who gets to defend what, for whom, and to what extent will change forever. All right? That is my prediction. Mars is going to be transiting the U.S. 12th house. Since I believe that the U.S. is a Sagittarius rising, Mars transiting the U.S. 12th house, not good. Watch out for more false flags coming our way here in this country. Okay? All right. That's it for the world stage for now. That's plenty to chew on. Let's we got about 20 minutes left. Let's get into a free reading here. Hello there.
Robert Phoenix.
That's me.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Who's this?
This is Jason.
Hey, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Yourself?
I'm doing okay. I'm recovering from a intense weekend, but I'm back on the case. So, what can we do for you today, Jason?
Well, I just wanted to kind of look at things generally from maybe a longer-term perspective. I mean, I've got Mars and Scorpio natally, and so I'm going to come up on that transiting Saturn conjunction to my Mars anyway a little later on, in addition to what you talked about as far as the one we're all going to have. So, and that's in the 11th house because my 11th house starts at 18 Scorpio.
18 Scorpio. Okay. And you're gonna have Mars.
So it's pretty much after it moving direct, it's pretty much, basically getting right on there, on the cusp right now. Yeah.
So Mars is coming into your 11th house, and you've got and so Saturn's been transiting your 11th house, and you say you have natal Mars there as well.
Yeah, I do. I've got pretty much everything there. I mean, I've got 4 planets in there in the 11th. Let
me just get your chart up real quick so we can look at that, because I think this is going to be an interesting kind of moment to check things out here. I think people will find this interesting. I know I will. Hold on one sec. All right, so here we go. Let's see here, and let's go here. And let's go. How about here? All right. Okay, hit me with your birthday.
Okay, it's 12/20/72. That's 8:14 a.m.
12/20/72. 1972, and okay, we're almost there. 12/27/72. And what time again?
8:14 a.m.
Okay, and where?
That's South Bend, Indiana.
Bend, Indiana. Okay. Bend. Is it South Bend?
Yes.
South Bend. Here we go. All right. Here we go. All right. So, yep, there's your 11th house. You got Mars. Here's what hold on a second. I got to make sure that I've got the right. Hold on.
Are you in Placidus?
Yeah, I'm in. Yeah. What do you use?
Yeah, that's what I use also.
Okay, hold on. I just have to make sure I have the right thing here. Modify reference place. So it's the birthplace. I think we have it here. So make sure, yeah, birthplace. All right. So when I look at your chart, I don't see. Let me just do this one more time. July 28th. I'm sorry. December 27th, 1972.
December 20th. December 20th.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was wondering. It didn't look right to me. There we go. December 20th, 1970, 8:14 a.m. And yeah, all right, better. Because all those other planets had shifted a bit. Okay, so there's Mars at 23 degrees. So you're going to have, Mars is going to be primarily in your 10th house for most of its run. Now, now it's going to catch up with your natal Mars at 23, so you're going to have a Mars return. And right now, I see Mars is, your Pluto's at 4 Libra, and then you've got Uranus at 22 Libra. So you have a when Mars went into Scorpio, it was a trine your moon exactly at 0 degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. So you would have had some real interesting energy around relationship and getting to kind of a deeper emotional core inside relationship, specifically because your moon also squares your Pluto. So you'll get the Mars trine coming in and transforming your emotions and how they fit into your existing relationship or any relationship moving forward, but also transforming what you feel around partnership and relationship and the balance between the two, right? Because you're here to achieve balance within that realm. Mars and Moon and Cancer, your Moon and my Mars are conjunct exactly. So, you're here to find this place between, where you put your emotion and where you give and nurture versus what you give back. It's a really interesting dynamic. So Mars coming in through the Moon or through the 10th house and into the Moon would kind of regenerate that and bring that back into focus and make it really a lot more important. Because also with this Mars 10th house transit, and I'm going to be kind of upfront and honest here, your energy should not be in relationship right now. It should be in your career, because that's the 10th house. So you have to work out on the side. Hey, look, I love you. I need, and I know that you need this from me, but I got to go over here. This is where the urgency is, and this is where the intensity is. And it doesn't mean I love you less, or it doesn't mean I love you less, but I got to focus on this right now. So that's your Mars mission. That's your mission to Mars at the moment. Now, when it comes into your 11th house, you're going to have this opportunity to kind of reevaluate a lot of your social connections. Are they working for you? Scorpio is really surgical. When it's time to drop somebody, it drops somebody or something. But it also indicates that there's the potential for new connections, new social networks, new groups. But when we get into Scorpio, there's always, it's always an exchange. One thing passes away and another thing comes into being. So with Mars it's about being active, though. It's not it working on you, but you working on it. Okay, so it also indicates that there can be a really dynamic, reinvigorating sort of relationship with how you feel about the world. You know, do you feel hopeful? Do you feel positive? Do you feel like there's some, you know, some promise in the world that we live in? And if not, then Mars in Scorpio says, well, make a difference. Do something. Make it a better world, right? And then it's going to conjunct your, right around that time, right? So your Saturn is Saturn, transiting Saturn, is going to be at 17 degrees when this Mars conjunction happens. That's going to put it in your 10th house still. So that's going to be it's not going to be an 11th house experience for you. It's going to be a 10th house experience. So that is going to culminate in this sense of urgency for you. And it's going to culminate, for everybody, the Mars-Saturn conjunction is about frustration. Because Mars wants to act and act now, and Saturn says wait. Saturn says take the long-term journey or the long look or whatever it is, have discipline, put the time in, and Mars says I've had enough. I'm going to do this. And so for each of us, we're going to be faced with this kind of moment in time where we're going to have to make a choice. And the choice is, do we act or do we repress this feeling of action so that we can stay with something that's tried and true, which is Saturn, or do we somehow find a point of integration where we know what we know, which is Saturn, which is wisdom, and then we take that and we act with Mars. So I would say, there's a good friend of mine who has a saying, know what you want and trust what you know. And I think that the Mars-Saturn conjunction is going to be about that. And for you, it's going to be your 10th house, which is going to be work-related, career-related, energy-related. You're going to have to make, I think, a choice. And your choice is, am I going to throw down with what I'm doing right now and put everything into it, or am I going to change this somehow? And am I going to go in a new direction and trust this? And am I trust what I know as a result of this, something that I put some time and energy into? So it's going to, Mars in the 10th house is going to be a good run for you. And I would say, work with it and stay with that energy and stay on top of it. And your ascendant is at what, 28 Sagittarius?
28. Sun is there too.
Your sun is right there on the ascendant. So you just had a Mars-Sun sextile with Mars coming over your midheaven, which would have been very, very dynamic for you. And hopefully you would have received some kind of encouragement or affirmation, both in terms of what you do and who you are. So, and then taking that energy, again, with Mars in the 10th house and building on that. And eventually when Mars makes that transit from Scorpio into Sag, you're going to have Mars
over everything.
Over everything, which will be very interesting for you. And will reinvigorate your social life, your relationship life. It will reinvigorate your spiritual life with Neptune. And a lot of those planets are going to be on the sextile with Pluto. So Mars is going to be a very dynamic actor and agent in your life until the end of the year, really, and beyond, right? So, roll with it, man. Just
and I'm feeling that. I'm feeling it, definitely.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, stay with it and just see where it takes you. I like Mars in the 10th house. I like it in Scorpio because it's right up there. It's near the zenith of the chart. You get to work on the energy. Mars going through the 12th or Mars going through the 8th is much more difficult. So as long as you got it up. And Mars, by the way, in Capricorn, that's also really cool. So now you've got Mars in Scorpio, but you also have Mars in the 10th house, which is Capricorn's house. So it's like a double bonus.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay.
Hey, I definitely appreciate it. I'm always a supporter. You know who this is, right?
Yeah, I do, Jason. Of course. It's Sagittarius. Of course.
Yep.
It's good to hear from you. And I like that you've been put my tweets up on Twitter. So I like that. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate that.
No, it's never a problem. I'm always a supporter of someone who I think is, you're advancing astrology, and I really appreciate that. You are just bringing more credibility to it. And I appreciate your approach and everything you do for it. So thank you.
Well, coming from you, man, that is like a super high compliment. If you guys don't know who Jason is, he's Sagittarian Mind. He's over on Twitter. He's really active on Twitter. He's an astrologer himself. I've had him on the show. And, so coming from you, man, that is just a fantastic compliment. So thank you very much.
Hey, no problem. Keep up the good work. Thanks a lot.
All right, Jason, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Bye.
So that's Jason, my friend. And he said, you know who this is? Yeah, I know who you are. It took me a while to get there, but I figured that out. All right, we got about 8 minutes left in the show. And by the way, if you want to read from Jason, he's a very good reader. I highly recommend it. Sagittarian Mind over on Twitter. So there you go. We got about 8 minutes left here. I'm going to be transitioning off this show, and I'm going to be hanging out with Greg on the Higher Side Chats. We're going to do a recording of the podcast, and I'll be on the Higher Side Chats. I'm not sure when he's going to air it, but I'm going to be making that transition here in a few minutes and talking to him. And I'll get to be asked questions instead of asking other people questions. It'll be an interesting sort of moment in time. If you are listening to this broadcast on the internet, or as we have it on YouTube, you can donate if you feel like it. And if you donate any amount, I will give you a 6-month transit report. How's that sound? I'll give it to you. Donation of any level, you get a 6-month transit report. And I'm going to make this offer. Anybody listening to this show, if you have not had a reading from me, you're a first-time client, I'm going to take $50 off of my reading fee, which is $125 for reading, not $125 for an hour. Sometimes we go over. And I'm going to have I'm going to do this for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, $75 if you've never had a reading from me. So I'm taking $50 off of my normal price. So if you want to donate anything, I'll send you a 6-month transit report so you get a little something back. And if you have not had a reading before with me, I'm gonna give you a $50 discount and charge you $75 for an hour reading. Okay, that should do it. So I'll be back on Friday with Henrik Palmgren. Don't miss this show. Don't miss it. It's going to be a very, very good show. I already have strong feelings about it, and I'll get into that more of that on Friday. Here, let me just tell you this. So I'm going to tease you a little bit for this show. Okay? Here's the tease. The show is happening on Friday, which is August 1st, which is my father's birthday. Number one. Number two, Henrik is from Göteborg, which is where my relatives come from. So when my family on my mother's side came to this country, they left from Göteborg. That was where they were from. So my family comes from where Henrik is from and his family. So this is going to be a very interesting show just based on these dynamics, these ancestral dynamics. You don't want to miss it. All right. You know the drill. Use your head to stay open and your heart to stay real. This is Robert Phoenix. I will see you all on Friday. Have a magnificent week. Here's Philip K. Dick.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.